Under the perpetual gloom that choked the ashen skies of Chorus 4, a darkness that was not so much absence of light as it was a living entity pressing in on all things, explorator Malker Halios hunched over his sanctified data slate like a penitent supplicant before the altar of forgotten knowledge. The ghostly pallor cast by his work's illumination transformed his face into a mask of cracked leather stretched over the stern countenance of a man who had spent 3 decades in the service of both the Omnissiah and the God Emperor's truth. The flickering light pooled in the deep creases around his eyes, the badges of service earned by endless scrutiny of secrets best left buried. Outside, the planet's ancient bones shifted in perpetual agony, the tremors of volcanic vents in the distance sending up fresh columns of sulfurous smoke to join the poisoned sky, their angry red light bleeding into the perpetual gloom like the blood seeping from a wound that would never heal. The HAB unit's prefabricated walls hummed with the low drone of the Mechanicus, the comforting, familiar rhythms of Imperial machinery holding the darkness at bay, the air recyclers, waging their endless war against the toxic atmosphere, the pulsing of the void shield generators like a second heartbeat, the occasional chirrup of the Orspec scanners as they dissected seismic activity. This symphony of survival had become white noise, a lullaby to soothe nerves frayed by the constant awareness of the forsaken hellscape that pressed in on him from all sides. The chamber was a testament to the careful curation of decades spent in pursuit of the past, and here, in the shadow of the ruins of the 8th Legion's fortress monastery, the shadows seemed to pool deeper, colder, and thicker than on any other world he'd served. The candlelit shrine to the Emperor of Mankind in the corner, its flickering flames casting a dance of the damned across the gathered relics, and the icon of the Master of the First, the Celestial, was a beacon in the face of the encroaching dark fragment of ceramite etched with the broken sigil of an unknown chapter, a tarnished aquila, symbol of the Imperium, plucked from the ruins of what might have once been a place of governance, a collection of bone styluses. Their delicate craftsmanship whispering of forgotten scribes, lords of the shadowed past whose hands once held the power to shape worlds. The stillness of the room was shattered not by the groaning of the planet's bones, nor by the distant rumble of volcanic fury, but by the weight of the object resting on the archivist's worktable, a book, its leather hide cracked and brittle with the passage of time but still holding the scent of its terrible origins, its pages yellowed with malice but preserved, the binding, the creation of the Eldar, and the first things that had not been done for the sake of the Emperor, but the past. The object, the thing that had made the expedition worthwhile, the prize that Captain Van's team had unearthed from the bowels of the ruins, had already been reported up to the fleet in orbit, their ships hanging in the void like raptors. But the knowledge that it was now in his possession, the prelude to the horrors of destruction, the very essence of the Night Lords, was a thing that had settled in his gut like a cold stone. The book, not a data slate, not a vox crystal, not a cogitator's memory, but a relic of a time before the Imperium's vast and efficient bureaucracy, a written record of suffering, and the first step in the unraveling of the doom that was known to the 8th Legion. It was a rarity, and for that reason alone, it would have been worthy of his attention, but it was the contents that had caused the first stirrings of genuine dread, for the first thing that had been done, the first thing that had been recorded, the first thing that had been written, was the truth of the Night Lords. The Lucis Veritatis had come to this forgotten corner of the galaxy, far from the holy lanes of Imperial shipping, listed in the ancient astrocartographic charts only as a tombstone of compliance, a world marked as non-compliant and purged, a footnote in the annals of the Great Crusade, but this world had revealed itself to be something far more sinister, the ruins of a fortress monastery of the Night Lords, the 8th Legion, the sons of Nostramo. The jagged skeletal remains of spires, broken and silent, the bones of the mighty, the towers of the wicked, the fortress that had been built to terrorize the galaxy, and had been torn down by the very forces of darkness that had birthed it. The gloom of the HAB, the only light his own, the flickering candle, the glow of the slate, the silent, the crushing weight of the past, the weight of the book, and the weight of the knowledge held within it. The archivist adjusted the lamp's aperture with careful, deliberate movements, the servomotors of his augmetic fingers whirring as he calibrated the precise beam of luminance to fall upon the ancient text without scorching the pages, the warm, the cold, the burning, the way the light pooled on the tome's cover. The winged skull, the symbol of the 8th Legion, pressed into the leather, the sigil of the Night Lords, a mark of the traitor's pride, a promise of the nightmares to come. The air in the HAB was thick with the scent of the amisk he poured into a small metal cup, the dull amber liquid swirling like liquid gold, the fumes of the spirit, the holy oil, the sacred unguent, the only thing that could stand between him and the horrors that waited within the pages. The sip of the liquor, the burning, the heat, the way it spread through his chest, a brief defiance against the chill that was not the natural cold of the planet, but the cold of the ruins, the cold of the past, the cold of a presence long dead, but still present in the shadows that clung to the walls of his chamber. His lips moved in silent prayer, a final invocation to the master of mankind, the God Emperor, the Omnissiah, the only hope for protection against the things that were coming, and then he opened the book. The first page bore no title, no dedication, no preamble, only a simple flowing script, a stark contrast to the darkness that lay within the text, the words that would name the first of the Night Lords, the first of the damned, the first of the monsters that the Emperor had created and then destroyed. The history of the Night Haunter and his children. The words danced before the archivist, and he began to read, the quill in his hand beginning to scratch notes in the journal he'd prepared, his own words of defiance, of truth, of the only thing that could stand against the lies of the past. The voice of the ancient text whispered in his mind, a tale that began in the twilight of humanity's past, when the Emperor of mankind, the Golden Throne, the Master of the Stars, the Father of the Primarchs, walked the secret paths of old Terra, hidden and watchful, his vision for the future of mankind a burning light in the encroaching darkness of the galaxy. The dream of the Imperium, the dream of the Great Crusade, the dream of mankind united under the banner of the Emperor, the dream of a golden age of unity and peace, a world forged in the fires of the Emperor's will, a galaxy of order and light. But the Emperor knew the price of the dream, the cost of the future, the vile necessity of the tools of suffering, the judges, the Inquisition, the executioners had tools of fear. The Emperor's laboratory, the sanctum sanctorum beneath the ancient peaks of the Himalayas, the birthplace of the Primarchs, the 20 sons of the Emperor's will, crafted from the gold of the Master's gene, the finest of the superhuman, the generals of the Great Crusade, the lords of the legions, the heralds of the future filled with the glory of the Emperor. Eighth Primarch, the embryo floating in the amniotic, the genetic material, the first of the future, the first of the Night Lords, the gift of the Emperor, the gift of the shadows, the gift of the night, the gift of the vision, the sight beyond the darkness, the eyes that could pierce the blackest of voids, the ears that could hear the whisper of a heartbeat in the distance, the scent of fear, the taste of lies, the gift of the judge, the one who delivered the judgment, the Emperor's judgment, the final decree, the inexorable. Terrible, the inevitable, the hand of the Emperor, the terror that would come to those who defied the light of the Imperium. The Emperor looked upon his creation, the tenderness of the Father, the grief of the Father, the burden of the Eighth Primarch, the weight of the knowledge that the future was built on the backs of the damned, and the weight of the knowledge that the future was built on the backs of those who would embrace the darkness, the very darkness that would come to consume the Imperium. The ruinous powers, the chaos gods, the ever-hungry shadows of the warp, the whispers of the dark gods, the agents of the ruin, the fourfold ruin, reached out from the Empyrean, their claws, their talons, their hunger, their malice, their fear, their ambition, their thirst for the destruction of the Emperor's vision. And in a moment of desperation, of sabotage, of the great corruption, the ruinous powers scattered the infant Primarchs across the galaxy, their gestational pods, the Emperor's hope. Flung into the madness of the Empyrean, the storm of the warp, the journey of the damned, the pods of the Primarchs, the lost children, the lost sons, the lost hope, the future of the Eighth Legion, the Eighth Primarch, the son of the shadows, the son of the night, the son of the judgment, the son of the terror, the pod that was hurled into the void, the warp, the storm, the journey that took him to the world of eternal night, the world of shadows, the planet of Nostramo, the world of endless night. The world where the sun never shone, the world where the strong ruled, the world of the merciless, the place of the damned, the cradle of the Night Lords. The Emperor's heart heavy with the loss of his sons, the loss of his future, the loss of the vision, the loss of the dream, the weight of the sacrifice, the weight of the choice, the path of the future, the construction of the legions, the creation of the warriors of the Imperium, the first of the Eighth Legion, the warriors of the night, the warriors of the shadows, their eyes, black as the void, the iris, the pupil, the sclera, all merged into a single, unbroken sea of darkness, the eyes of the night, the sight beyond the mortal. The ability to see in the dark, to see the truth of the darkness, the pale skin, the pallor of the dead, the ghostly pallor of the damned, the skin that was untouched by the sun, the skin that was the color of the moon, the skin of those who had never known light, the skin of the born, the skin of the bred, the gene of the Primarch, the gift of the Emperor, the gift of the shadows, the gift of the judgment, the gift of the terror, the gift of the fear. The Emperor's will, the Emperor's design, the Emperor's plan for the Eighth Legion, the executioners, the bringers of the Emperor's justice, the terror of the shadows, the fear of the night, the swift and final retribution for those who defied the Imperium, the defiance of the Emperor's will, the defiance of the Emperor's truth, the defiance of the Emperor's light. Eighth Legion was born of the Emperor's will, of the warriors of the first recruits, the murderers, the thieves, the scum of the old Terra, the denizens of the prison sinks, the vast caverns beneath the hive cities of old Terra, the places of the damned, the places forgot, the places where the condemned were cast, the forgotten, the children born in the dark, the pale children of the prison sinks, the children who navigated the darkness, the children of the shadows, the children of the night, the children of the judgment. The children of the fear, the children of the terror. The Imperial gatherers, the agents of the Emperor's will, descended into the sinkholes, into the depths of the forgotten, the dark, the places where the light never reached, the places where the children of the night were born, the children with pale eyes, pale skin, the silent, the hunters, the predators, the ones who had learned to survive in the dark, the ones who had learned to judge, to punish, to deliver the pain of the inevitable, the final judgment, the ones who had no mercy for the weak. The ones who had no mercy for the weak, the silent, the predators, the perfect recruits, the perfect vessels for the Emperor's gene seed, the seed of the 8th Primarch, the seed of the night. The seed of the night, the seed of the darkness, the seed of the judgment, the seed of the terror. First Night Lords, the warriors of the 8th Legion, the warriors of the Emperor's judgment, the warriors of the shadows, the warriors who moved through the darkness like fog, the warriors who struck without warning, the warriors who left only silence, the warriors of the Emperor's justice, the warriors of terror, the warriors who were not cruel, but were necessary, the necessary evil, the evil that was not evil, the judgment of the Emperor's will, the judgment of the Emperor's truth, the judgment of the Emperor's light. The first of the Night Lords, the first of the warriors of the 8th Legion, the first of the judges, the first of the executioners, the first of the terror, the first of the fear, the first of the shadows, the first of the night, the first of the damned, the first of the monsters, the first of the Night Lords. The archivist read on, the ink staining his quill, the darkness of the chamber pressing in, the weight of the past, the weight of the future, the weight of the truth, the weight of the knowledge that the world outside was the world of the 8th Legion, the world of monsters, the world of the damned, the world of the Night Lords, and the weight of the knowledge that the truth was coming, the truth of the fall of the 8th Legion, the truth of the horror that was coming, the horror that was already here, the horror that was the past. The horror of the Night Lords, the first of the Night Lords, the last of the Emperor's hope, the first of the traitors, the first of the damned, the first of the monsters, the first of the Night Lords, the archivist read on. The air of the enclave still hung heavy with the scent of scorched metal and the copper tang of drying blood, silent witnesses to the Legion's grim artistry. Justice had been transformed into a visceral tableau, the perpetrators of genetic corruption no longer hidden but elevated, their own forms grotesquely mirrored to the abominations they'd once crafted. Their reconfigured limbs, twisted into impossible angles, their faces elongated into the familiar mockeries of the Generat, stood as silent sentinels in the civic squares, their eyes open wide in frozen terror. The Night Lords had not garbled their message with rhetoric. No words, no declarations, no proclamations of the Emperor's justice needed to be etched into the walls. The silent sermon of broken flesh and twisted symmetry spread faster than any Vox transmission, its echoes reverberating through the underhives of the surrounding worlds. Within 3 days, 3 more enclaves of suspected genoccultists, minds aflame with visions of sharing their compatriots, fate, surrendered to the fleeing Imperial authorities, their hands trembling with more than mere submission, their souls gripped by the unspoken sermon of the corpse-strewn plazas. Similarly, when the noble court of Antioch, cloaked in their arrogance and ancient lineage, resumed their secretive sybreeding programs, believing themselves insulated by the marble walls of privilege and the delusion of inviolate status, the Night Lords demonstrated that their reach was not constrained by the frail boundaries of mortal law. Dawn found the heart of the court, the great hall where their decadent schemes had been whispered, transformed into a scene of operatic horror. The courtiers were arranged in perfect stillness, their lean bodies, bound in the lavish silks befitting their station, twisted into a tableau that mirrored the Emperor's aquila, each wing of the grand avian silhouette formed by the contorted postures of the dead. Scaled to perfection, the grisly symbol of Imperial authority was only visible from the balconies above, a macabre joke of ascent and perspective, a message imprinted on the minds of those who would later discover it. The cold precision of the display was more terrifying than any massacre. Wealth, the illustrious bloodlines stretching back to pre-unification days, their intricate networks of favors and alliances, all of it, proved worthless against the dark justice that had flowed through their corridors like a glacier. The message was clear, etched into the very air with the stench of death. No rank, no power, no fortress of arrogance could shield anyone from the Emperor's retribution, delivered by the shadowed hands of the 8th Legion. Beyond the terror of individual cells and noble courts, the Legion tested their mettle against the vast boiling tide of the March of 10 million, the sprawling rebellion that had erupted across the Pan-Pacific region, fueled by the desperation of the formal tithe extraction. The Night Lords, attuned to the currents of terror like a predator senses its prey's fear, eschewed the brute force tactics of the other legions, the thunderous frontal assaults that would have painted entire continents with the blood of 10 million soldiers. Instead, they wove a different kind of war. Under the cover of Nostramo's perpetual night, the Legion's elite killers slipped through the rebels' defenses like wraiths, their daggers finding the throats of the rebellion's leaders. High-ranking officers, charismatic orators, and the silent architects of logistical networks were plucked from their beds, their command tents, their guarded sanctuaries. The bodies were left dangling from the rebels' own banners the next morning, or were laid out upon the altars of their own makeshift shrines, their faces locked in the final expressions of bewildered surprise. The Night Lords did not announce themselves. They did not demand surrender. They simply vanished into the night as swiftly as they had come, leaving only the chilling evidence of their passage. The rebels, the mighty force of 10 million, began to unravel like a frayed tapestry. Each night deepened the fear, each new disappearance a fresh wound in their collective morale. Paranoia blossomed like a poisonous flower, its venomous roots twisting through their ranks. The rebellion's strength, once seemingly unbreakable, fractured into 1,000 shards of suspicion and self-preservation. The survivors, those who watched the Night Lords, work from the shadows, their nights filled with the dread of phantom footsteps, would become the most fervent adherents of the Imperium, their voices hoarse with praise for the Emperor's mercy. The horror of these early campaigns became a grim catechism for the Legion, a defining scripture that echoed with every brutal act. The Night Lords, clad in their midnight armor, did not see themselves as mere killers. They were executioners, their instruments sharpened by the cold calculus of necessity. For them, fear was a scalpel, not a bludgeon. It was a tool honed for maximum efficiency, a force multiplier for a legion that was perpetually outnumbered, its reach extended through the primal terror that resonated in the human heart. The Night Lords believed that their methods, in all their brutal theater, were ultimately more merciful than the alternative. They viewed the horrors of conventional warfare as vast meat-grinder battles of attrition, where entire populations and legions were choked into the mutas, the greater evil. If a population, terrified into submission, could be spared the wholesale destruction that would have inevitably followed, was that not the greater act of mercy? The whispered fear, the unseen dread, it was a currency that saved more lives than it cost, or so their logic went. This was the cold logic that governed their violence, a stark internal logic that outsiders often misinterpreted as madness. To these Night Lords, every action, every drop of blood spilled, every scream extracted from the darkness was measured, calibrated. They were not the indiscriminate demons of the warp. Their cruelty was a meticulous surgical process, targeting the guilty, the corrupt, the seditious, leaving the innocent to navigate the peace they were forced to create. Butcher, the corrupt governor, the sadistic slave master, these were the faces that the Night Lords sought in the shadows, their crimes permanently etched into their flesh. The innocent, the cowering miner, the starving child, they were spared. There lives an unintended consequence of the Legion's precision. This selective application of terror, this cold logic of retribution, created a chilling effect that spread like a contagion, transforming the conquered populations into the Legion's unwitting enforcers. Dissidents and rebels were given up to their tormentors by their own kin, fearful that the Night Lord's attention would fall upon them all. The fear of provoking the Legion's gaze became a more efficient deterrent than any Imperial peacekeeping force. This the Legion's grim purpose evolved, as the unification wars ground on, their bloody campaigns waning as the scattered remnants of the old world yielded to the Emperor's indomitable will. The crucible of Terra, with its myriad of horrors, prison-sink cities and genicult monstrosities, was slowly being cleansed. The Great Crusade loomed, a vast and daring enterprise, spilling the Emperor's light into the galaxy's cold, dark abyss. The Night Lords, their roles cemented in the death of the fallen world, found their purpose expanding. Their theater of terror, their dark symphony of justice, would now be carried into the void itself, to 1,000 worlds lost in the grip of the long night, worlds where the belief in the Emperor's justice had been snuffed out like the stars of the old night. The 8th Legion, still a legion without a primarch, still a fatherless force of barely contained ferocity, stood ready to deliver the Emperor's judgment to those who believed themselves to live beyond its reach. Deep within the void, where the light of stars was but a faint memory, hung Nostramo, a black pearl, a cancerous orb orbiting a dying star, its feeble light consumed by the planet's thick, toxic atmosphere. The light that touched the surface of Nostramo was a ghostly thing, a pale imitation of the day, a twilight that never brightened, never deepened. At high noon, if the concept of noon could be applied to such a place of perpetual gloom, the light was still weaker than the deepest dusk on Terra. The people of Nostramo were born into this twilight, their eyes permanently dilated, their pupils wide black pools of adaptation, their skin as pale as the moonless void, their souls shaped by the grinding darkness, reflecting the depths from which they crawled. The habitable, if barely habitable, regions of the planet were dominated by 5 massive hive cities, each a titan of steel and decay. Nostramo Prime, the largest, a sprawling monument to human misery, and the others, numbered in sequence down to Nostramo Quintus, each was a self-contained ecosystem of industrial hell. The architecture was a brutal mockery of form, a towering testament to function. Kilometers of industrial spires, blackened with centuries of smoke and soot, belched toxic fumes into the already poisoned sky, creating a perpetual twilight haze that hung like a shroud over the cities. The air was thick with the stench of burning promethium, the acrid tang of industrial waste, and the faint metallic tang of the adamantium that was the planet's lifeblood. Walkways spanned the narrow ravines, barely wide enough for two men to pass, their metal skeletons groaning under the weight of the constant foot traffic. Everywhere, an oppressive sense of compression. The people, huddled masses, their bodies pressed together in the narrow streets, their very existence a testament to the crushing weight of their numbers. Nostramo had no true sunshine, no days that could be called bright. The rare moments of respite, when the clouds parted momentarily, allowing the dying star's feeble rays to kiss the surface, were met not with the joy of the sun's warmth, but with fear. The citizens of Nostramo shied away from the unexpected light, shielding their eyes, their faces twisted in disgust. The light was a foreign thing, an unwelcome intruder, and they were a people of the dark. Those wealthy few who could afford it, the aristocratic overlords who ruled the upper spires, used dim blue lighting strips, their weak glow casting more shadows than they banished. The wealthy lived above, their spires reaching towards the toxic sky, their lives of luxury and brutality, a world away from the teeming masses below. The majority of the population, the workers, the destitute, the lost, were crammed into the lower levels, each level descending deeper into squalor, until the underhive, where the light never touched at all, where the darkness was absolute, and the only law was survival. The true wealth of Nostramo lay beneath the surface, far beneath the misery of the underhive, in the rich veins of adamantium, that precious metal that was the bedrock of the Imperium, forming the backbone of starships, titans, and fortifications. The vast mines, the throbbing heart of the planet's economy, were burrowed into the planet's crust like a worm into the heart of a rotting corpse. The tunnels, narrow and dangerous, snaked downwards, their trajectories guided by avarice rather than any humanitarian concern for the miners. Generations of workers had been sacrificed to the deep, their bodies consumed by the black dust of the mines, their lungs ravaged, their bones brittle from the toxic exposure. The extraction of adamantium was measured in lives, each ton of ore weighed against the workers who died securing it. The wealth of the mines, immense and constant, flowed upwards, not downwards, filling the coffers of the ruling class, a collection of predatory parasites, self-styled nobility, who ruled with the callous indifference of their criminal counterparts. These were the lords of Nostramo, a motley, vicious collection of crime lords, corrupt nobles, and industrial barons who styled themselves with titles of grandeur, calling themselves the barons, the counts, the lords of Nostramo, their wealth and territories stolen from the suffering of the masses. The aristocracy of Nostramo, though their names echoed with a pretension to nobility, were indistinguishable from the gangs that ruled the lower levels. Their cruelty was a badge of honor, their wealth a testament to their ruthlessness. In the wealthier districts, their children, the sons and daughters, raised in the luxury of their lofty spires, formed into gangs, their elaborate costumes and gaudy displays of wealth a stark contrast to the ragged, drab clothing of the masses below. They strutted through the streets, their faces painted with grotesque masks, their hands calloused not from the mines, but from the practice of violence. Killing for pleasure as readily as for profit, their whims were the law. Beneath, in the factories and mines, the overseers, brutal men like the iron-handed overseers in the service of Corrugado, maintained order through savagery, their whips, their lasguns, their tools of coercion. The workers were little more than slaves, their lives measured in the quotas of adamantium, their bodies broken by the relentless pace of the mines. The overseers born of the system, their faces twisted into permanent masks of cruelty, their legacies shaped by the generations of torment they had inherited. Below them, in the lowest levels, where the veneer of civilization was shattered, the remnants of humanity, the feral gangs, the cannibals, the predators, fought for scraps of territory and resources like animals. These were the depths where the dark was absolute, and the distinction between predator and prey was the only law. The society of Nostramo, if it could be called such, was held together not by the bonds of kinship or common purpose, but by the raw, primal fear of starvation, violence, and the ever-present darkness. The darkness that was a physical manifestation of the suffocating despair that clung to the planet like a blanket. The predators, the overlords, the gangs, their very existence depended on the extraction of the adamantium, the lifeblood of the planet, and the relentless flow of wealth to the privileged few. And yet, despite or perhaps because of the vileness of its existence, Nostramo functioned, the mines always producing, the factories churning out their deadly exports, the wealth that flowed from the planet's tortured veins, tripling the efforts of the crime syndicates when they were particularly brutal and efficient. The planet's economy was a bloated, festering thing, thriving on the despair of the masses, and yet it thrived, a valuable asset, a dark, distasteful jewel in the crown of whatever interstellar power had the audacity to claim it. This was the world that fate had prepared for the arrival of the Emperor's Sona fragment of the divine, cast into the abyss of human suffering. A world of darkness that seemed a fitting crucible to forge a weapon of justice, a tool of retribution for a future Imperium, but also a mirror of the darkness that was to come. This was the cradle of Nostramo, its darkness, its corruption, and its inevitable doom. Into this eternal night fell a child, a starborn seed, whose arrival shattered the heavens. The sky above Nostramo Quintus, the fifth hive city, a particularly grim monument to industrial decay, was briefly illuminated by the streaks of light as a comet streaked through the atmosphere. The citizens below, their eyes accustomed to the perpetual gloom, shielded their sensitive eyes, splitting their minds between the fear of an omen and the flicker of hope. The impact of the comet-like pod, glowing with the heat of its descent, tore through the city's rotten architecture, its descent a violent one, a cascade of destruction. It tore through layer after layer, the ancient, decaying structures offering little more resistance than the memories of the workers who had once inhabited them. The impact continued, its trajectory a path of destruction, tearing through the underhive, through the surface of the planet, and into the depths of the geosphere, until it finally came to rest in the molten core of the world. The child inside, the infant primarch, should have been incinerated instantly, consumed by the fiery heart of the planet. How he survived is a matter of whispered speculation. Some say he swam through the molten metal. Others claimed volcanic activity, the whims of the planet's own heart, carried him back towards the surface. The impossible, the inexplicable, is the only certainty. The infant primarch emerged from the wreckage of his pod, alone, naked, newborn, and yet already a shapeshifter beneath the weight of destiny. Unlike his brother primarchs, scattered across worlds of light and hope, no one found him. No protective hands reached out to him, no gentle cradle rocked him, no human voices whispered his name. The boy, the being who would become Konrad Curze, was abandoned to the unforgiving, lethal embrace of Nostromo's underhive, the most dangerous environment imaginable. Like all primarchs, the nameless child grew rapidly, his body, a vessel of raw potential, a testament to the Emperor's genetic design. But unlike his brothers, his growth was shaped by the feral, brutal environment of the underhive. He learned to hunt the feral creatures that stalked the darkness, their sharp claws and poisonous fangs his only companions during his formative years. He observed their movements, their stealth, their predatory instincts, learning them, absorbing them into his burgeoning being. He observed the human predators, the gangs that prowled the tunnels, hunting the weak and vulnerable, the discarded, the lost. The young primarch learned their language, the brutal dialect of the underhive, the language of violence and survival, before the first word was ever spoken to him. His mind was a sponge, soaking up the depravity of his surroundings, the cruelty of the world, the brutality of its inhabitants. As he grew, his mind, as potent as his body, began to develop, and with it came the visions. The visions were not a gift, but a curse, a torment that would plague him throughout his life. The child primarch began to experience vivid, horrifying glimpses of the future. Unlike his father's foresight, which was a calculated tapestry of possibilities, the boy's visions were a torrent of pain, a single, unrelenting stream of the darkest futures. He saw atrocities yet to come. He saw betrayals yet to be born. He saw the destruction of entire worlds, the death of billions, the collapse of empires, the fading of the Emperor's light. He saw his own death, his heart pierced by a blade, the assassin's face obscured in the shadows yet somehow familiar. These visions were not prophecies, they were tortures, inflicted upon him without warning, without control. They struck him with the intensity of reality, choking him, convulsing him, his body collapsing into seizures as he fought to separate the truth of the present moment from the nightmare of the future. The underhive, a place populated by the desperate and the predatory, the greedy and the violent, the opportunistic and the sadistic, was no place for weakness. These seizures were moments of vulnerability, moments where the young primarch was a victim, a target for the predators that prowled the darkness. In this crucible, the boy's mind, twisted by his environment and the visions, began to develop a twisted sense of justice. The child, witnessing the horrors of the underhive, watching the suffering inflicted upon the helpless, the weak, the innocent, the mortals, began to develop a burning anger. The injustice, the cruelty, the greed, the corruption, it was an affront to his very being. Somewhere within him, deep within the genetic code that his father had imprinted, however faintly, the echo of the Emperor's original vision for the 8th Legion, a spark of righteous fury, crushed against the anvil of Nostromo's darkness. This was an anger, a desire for retribution, a thirst for vengeance that was honed, sharpened by the absence of guidance, the absence of the teachings of the Emperor, the absence of compassion. The world had taught him only cruelty, so his own sense of justice became a mirror of that cruelty. His first kill, the first criminal, perhaps a gang enforcer, a sadist noble's son, a brutal overseer caught in the act of depravity, was a simple, efficient, brutal act. The body was left where he fell, the act itself, sudden and swift, a message to the world around him. From this first spark of retribution, the legend of the Night Haunter began to spread. The people of the underhive began to whisper of the creature that stalked the darkness, a being that was not entirely human, not entirely animal, a ghost that punished the wicked. The whispers grew into legends, the legends into the stuff of nightmares. They called him this entity, the Night Haunter, a name that echoed with the primal fear of the dark. The tales grew into myths, the myths into the stories of the predator. The common folk believed he could see through walls. The nobles whispered that he could read the sins in a man's heart. The superstitious miners and the desperate workers spun tales of him being a manifestation of the planet itself, Nostramo's suffering, given form, an avatar of vengeance. The Primarch, listening to the whispers, the terror, the belief, the hope, the desperation, the fables, embraced this new identity wholeheartedly. He understood the power of fear. Fear was not just a tool, it was a weapon. Fear was a seed that could be planted in the hearts of the guilty, a seed that could grow into the forest of control. The killings became a theater, a morbid performance, the bodies of the guilty, meticulously arranged in impossible locations, their contorted forms telling a story of their crimes. As the legend grew, the Night Haunter's influence began to spread across the city. The fear he instilled began to reshape the very fabric of society. The streets that had once been bustling with the trade of the black market, the alleys that had been home to the depraved, the squares where the gangs had held their own impromptu courts, the executions, the festivities, all fell silent. The people of Nostramo Quintus, terrorized into submission, imposed their own curfews, locking themselves in their homes, barricading their doors, praying to the absent emperor or to any god that might hear them, that the Night Haunter would not find them. The children, the disobedient ones, the ones who once tested their parents' patience, were now threatened with the Night Haunter's attention, their mothers whispering the words in hushed, terrified tones, their fear more potent than any physical discipline. The fear began to work its magic, creating a semblance of order that had been impossible under the chaotic rule of the gangs and the overlords. The order, however, was brittle, born of the rawest, most primal fear rather than the social contract, the suppression of evil rather than the cultivation of good. Amidst the growing legend, the visions continued to torment the young Primarch, visions of the future, the grim future of the Legion, the visions of bloodshed and betrayal, visions of his own death. These visions were a constant companion, a shadow that followed him as he walked the streets of the Underhive, his mind a battlefield of the present and the future. The Primarch, Konrad Curze, though he did not yet know his own name, his campaign against the criminal overlords of Nostramo evolved into a relentless pursuit. The Night Haunter, his name, brand, his identity, his purpose, now focused on the leaders of the criminal syndicates, the men and women who had believed themselves untouchable, their power secured by their wealth and their armies of enforcers. The fortresses, the armored compounds, the high-security towers, the pleasure palaces, guarded by the best and the most brutal, were no longer sanctuaries. The Night Haunter, appearing in the heart of the most secure rooms, in the the night belonged to the Night Haunter alone, a solitary figure carving his own brand of justice into the twisted alleys of Nostramo Quintus, his every step echoing through the suffocating silence of a city that had learned the true meaning of fear. Criminals, once the predators prowling the eternal midnight, now cringed behind bolted doors, their bravado shattered by the knowledge that their own shadows could betray them to the vengeful specter haunting their streets, their crimes repaid in the sharp, brutal currency of their own suffering. A year had bled into the past, a year of relentless nights punctuated by the screams of the guilty and the soft thud of broken bodies falling onto the cold, unforgiving streets, the very air thick with the metallic tang of spilled blood and jellied, unchanging darkness. The violence that had nourished the hive cities for generations fed the brutal syndicates that had ruled them, withered and died under the pale, gaunt figures' watchful gaze, the people of Nostramo Quintus, for the first time in their starved lives, tasting the unfamiliar, alien flavor of peace. It was not peace born of joy or hope, but a suffocating, fragile thing, woven from the nightmare's own certainty that no crime could escape his notice, no transgression would go unanswered. The old power structures crumbled, their rotting carcasses left to the scavengers and the rats, and the empty void that remained yawned wide and dangerous, inviting its master to step into the light. The Night Haunter, no longer a phantom, a name whispered in terror, became flesh, a gaunt, terrible figure of bone-white skin stretched taut over sharp angles, his eyes, black as the gulfs between stars, staring out from beneath a mane of night-dark hair as he stepped onto the precipice of power, his voice a raw scrape of authority that could flay skin from bone. The citizens, the desperate, the broken, the survivors who had known only hunger and pain, recognized the architect of their newfound safety, a man who had traded his shadow for their shackles, and they bowed beneath the weight of his presence, not with love, but with a gratitude so laced with fear it was indistinguishable from the old dread. The transition from shadow to sovereign was a seamless, inevitable horror, a shifting of the dark's direction. The Night Haunter traded the mask of the hunter for the mantle of the king, and in doing so, revealed a new depth to the abyss, one that had been hidden in his isolation, in the hollowed-out center of his broken soul. Konrad Curze, the boy who had known only darkness, now found in the forgotten libraries of the fallen rulers, in the dusty tomes and crumbling scrolls, the ghosts of the past, a brutal education, a voracious consumption of the histories, philosophies, and legal machinations that had shaped the fates of empires and shattered them. He devoured knowledge like a man starved, his every waking moment spent dissecting the failures of rulers, the rise and fall of civilizations, searching for the patterns that might allow him to build something enduring, a kingdom of justice born of the same dark, unyielding pitilessness that had forged him. His edicts, when they came, were as cold and sharp as the blade of a guillotine, a legal code that mirrored his own soul, a merciless equation where the severity of the crime was the only variable, stripped of any mercy, any consideration of intent or motivation. A stolen loaf of bread, a whispered word of dissent, a glance at the wrong woman, all could be answered with equal brutal efficiency, a world where the simplest infraction brought a public maiming, the loss of a hand, a tongue of flame, blade, a cleaver, the screams of the punished, echoing through the newly lit streets of Nostramo Quintes, a testament to the new order. The streets, once dark and deadly, now glowed with the cold radiance of compliance, the mines humming with unaccustomed efficiency. The flow of wealth, once a trickle of stolen ore, began to flood the coffers of the city, the first glimpse of prosperity the people of Nostramo had ever known, a prosperity bought with a currency of fear so absolute, so pervasive, that it became the great equalizer. The people dared not grow too rich, dared not enjoy too much, dared not stand out from their neighbors. All were bound together in the shared terror of their ruler's dark gaze. The transformation spread across the hive cities like a creeping plague, a brutal, inexorable tide of order, as the rulers of neighboring territories, who had watched the rise of the Night Haunter with a mixture of fear and envy, began to adopt his methods, grafting his laws onto their own domains, their own survival, a desperate attempt to appease the Dark King they knew, with a sickening certainty, would one day set his gaze upon them. Before long, the entirety of Nostramo walked under the shadow of the Pale King's justice, a world where the only law was the fear of the consequences. Yet Curze, now at the apex of his power, his throne a throne of bones and shadows, remained as isolated, as tormented, as the boy who had crawled through the darkness. He was a man of contradictions, a paradox of the enlightened and the unhinged, his mind both a brilliant instrument of statecraft and a shattered vessel overflowing with the dark visions that had haunted him since his birth. He would stand for hours in the cold corridors of his fortress, his body rigid as stone, his eyes fixed on some unseen horizon, lost in the maelstrom of the future, the terrors of tomorrow, the betrayals, the wars, all the horrors dancing in the dark spaces of his mind. His rule was a pendulum of contradictions, a series of strange and unpredictable swings between the cold, calculated wisdom of the legislator, the architect of a functioning city-state, and the sudden, violent eruptions of the Night Haunter, the vengeful avenger who would descend upon the slightest infraction with a deluge of blood and screams. The population lived in an eternal twilight of uncertainty, a world where the next breath might bring them the benevolent gaze of their ruler or the nightmare's razor-sharp claws, the fear of their own king's capricious nature, an even greater shackle than the chains of his laws. Nearly a century had passed since the Great Crusade had begun, a century of ink and blood and terror, before the Emperor's light finally pierced the eternal night, a fleet of golden ships, throwing off their brilliance like a dying star, their radiance tearing through the obsidian sky, the first true daylight Nostramo had known. The light was a physical pain for Curze, a searing agony that clawed at his eyes, his very soul, but he did not flee nor hide. He felt the weight of destiny, the pull of some long-forgotten, unspoken promise, a hollow ache in his chest, a recognition of something he had always known but never dared to name. He stood before his palace, a figure of bone and shadow wrapped in the tattered remnants of his solitude, his dark eyes fixed as the delegation approached, a figure of radiant light cutting through the gloom, a figure whose presence dwarfed the very sun, blinding him, yet he could not look away. The Emperor approached, a being of pure light, yet Curze saw in his father's face, not just the divine Emperor but something of himself, a reflection in the twisted mirror of his own soul, the source of his power, a confirmation of his otherness, the answer to the question he had never dared to voice, the origin of his visions, the connection to his own fractured mind. In that moment of recognition, the fragile thread of his sanity snapped, the future flooding his vision, a torrent of images of betrayal, war, and the ultimate fall, the collapse of the Imperium, the twisting of his own legion into a parody of all they were meant to be, a grotesque mockery of justice. He collapsed, tearing at the unseeing, useless eyes that had betrayed him with the weight of their foresight, a scream of pure agony, a sound that echoed through the darkness, a man's howl, a child's wail, a primal grief that had been buried for centuries. The Emperor stepped forward, his movements impossibly gentle, restraining the flailing, breaking form of his son, his touch fleeting, yet weighted with the unbearable compassion of understanding, a flicker of recognition, a shared pain, a moment of connection that could, perhaps, have been a lifeline, a bridge to a different future. Curze's eyes, the eyes that had seen too much of the future, the darkness that had been his only companion, could not believe in the light. The moment of potential salvation was lost, replaced by the cold certainty of his despair. He pledged his loyalty, his voice a hollow echo of his own fading conviction, the words he spoke, the promises he made to his father, layered with the knowledge of his own inevitable downfall, the weight of his own grim prophecy, already dragging him under. As he departed Nostramo, the city he had built, the only home he had ever known, he left behind a world that stood as a monument to his will, a grotesque, dark mirror of his own twisted justice. He left behind the fear of his rule, the fear that had kept the order, the peace, the hollow prosperity, and he knew, with a certainty that had long since hardened into his bones, the order would crumble without him, the seeds of chaos, sown in the bedrock of his own fear, already germinating in the dark heart of the hive. He walked among the stars, his new home, the cold, sterile corridors of the Imperial fleet, a world that felt like a prison, his mind ever more distant, ever more broken, the visions, the waking nightmares, the screams, sleep, the comforting illusion of oblivion denied him, the horrors he had foreseen, playing out behind his closed lids, a ceaseless reel of despair. When he stood before his own sons, the 8th Legion, born of the darkness, the very essence of terror, the Night Lords, their armor, already a deep blue, the color of the void, the color of the night that had birthed him, their eyes, the same black pits that mirrored his own, the pale skin, the same shade as the moonless sky, he felt the pull of recognition, a connection deeper than the blood, a resonance of the inevitable, a shared understanding of the darkness that had shaped them. The Legion, the terrifying warriors who had carved their legacy through the darkest corners of the galaxy, knelt before him, their leader, their primarch, their gene father, not with a challenge, but with a reverence born of the shattered certainty that he was the perfect embodiment of their own twisted purpose, a being of absolute justice, a creature of terror and law, the shadow of order made manifest. Their acceptance of him, swift and seamless, was a hollow victory, a confirmation of the path he had foreseen. Under his guidance, the Legion, already a terrifying force, the whisper of the Emperor's wraith, their very existence meant to inspire fear, the Night Lords began to refine their methods, weaving their own dark heritage into the fabric of their tactics. Their armor became darker. The shadows of the Nostramo sky, the eternal night, the color of their armor, became a mirror of the void between stars, adorned with the symbols of nightmares, the flayed, the skulls, the instruments of torture, the cold, the sharp, the sleek, the beautiful, the grotesque, all rendered in metal and precious stone, a macabre elegance that would strike fear into the hearts of any who dared to look upon them. Their battle cries, the whispers of promised vengeance, their movements, the silent steps of the hunter, their approach, the slow, inexorable advance of night itself. Their tactics were honed, perfected, refined, the terror cultivated, not just a tool, but a weapon, the very essence of compliance, the calculated destruction of hope, the installation of absolute despair, the psychological warfare elevated to an art form, a symphony of dread. The first worlds to fall to the new Night Lords learned the true price of resistance, the cost of defiance, the lesson that was etched into their minds with a blade, 1,000 cuts, 1,000 agonies, and the first screams, the first whispers of despair, the voices of the lost, the voices of the damned, the very first lesson of the Imperium's wrath. The communications, the light, the hope, the very infrastructure of their worlds would be extinguished, one by one, like a dying candle, the darkness, the choking, suffocating darkness, descending upon them, a tangible, living, breathing thing, and then the whispers would begin, the promises of the coming night, the descriptions of the horrors to come, the images of the suffering, the pain, the despair, the words, the voices, the shadows, the very air, trembling with the inevitability, the certainty of destruction. The leaders, the commanders, the governors, the powerful, the symbols of the resistance, were made examples of, their suffering a spectacle, a grotesque display of the Imperium's justice, their bodies twisted into the macabre art, their screams a symphony of despair, a message to the masses, a promise of the consequences of resistance. The effectiveness of this terror was undeniable. The compliance, the quick, brutal, the efficient, the worlds, the once defiant, the once hopeful, the once proud, falling before the mere whisper of the Night Lords, approach surrendering the Imperium's truth embraced with a fervor born of the primal fear, the resources, the lives, the cities, spared the carnage of prolonged war, avoided the cold calculus of victory, the calculation of the minimal loss, the maximization of terror, the efficiency of fear. The salvation of the Imperium, the cost of the soul. But with each world, the perception of the fear, the cruelty, the terror, the role of the tool, the blade, the scythe, began to shift. The balance, the fragile line between means and purpose, between the shepherd of justice and the harbinger of doom, began to blur. The darkness, the legacy of the Nostramo, the dark king's shadow, the soul of the legion, the heart of the very primarch, began to wither. The line between the act of justice and the act of cruelty, so thin, so fragile, now shattered. The first to notice the hardening, the coldness, the growing cruelty, the first to see the shifting of the shadow, the faceless, the legion, the iron warriors, the masters of siege warfare, the architects of destruction, found the 8th Legion's methods, the theatricality, the excessive cruelty, the unnecessary, the wasteful, the inefficiency, the need for the spectacle, the need for the pain, the need for the fear, a distraction from the true purpose of war. The ultramarines, the builders of civilizations, the architects of the future, the visionaries, questioned the very fabric of their brothers. Compliance, the terror, the fear, the unsustainable foundation of an empire, the hollow husk of a civilization, built on the trembling legs of the subjects, the seeds of rebellion, the inevitable rot festering under the surface. The imperial fists, the warriors of honor, the servants of the throne, the architects of the impossible, the builders of the indomitable, found their methods, the dishonorable, the cowardly, the very antithesis of war, the shame of the imperial creed, the stain of treachery, the shadow of dishonor, even in the face of their undeniable effectiveness. Even Fulgrim, the phoenix, the radiant, the perfect, the one who had taken the broken, the shattered, the fallen, the night haunter, under his wing, the one who had tried to teach the balance of terror, the elegance of the cruel, the refinement of the blade, the art of the beautiful, the perfect, began to distance himself. The cold, the calculated, the elegant, the cruelty, the refined horror, the art of the 8th Legion, had mutated into something raw, like the primal scream of the damned, the unrestrained. The unbridled, the grotesque, the excess, the very thing he had tried to temper, the very darkness he had tried to guide, now twisted, the very heart of the Legion, the heart of the Primarch, poisoned the light, the promise of redemption, the flicker of hope extinguished, the darkness that had shaped them, the inevitable, the only reality, the only truth. The line between necessary violence and wanton cruelty had become a razor's edge, cutting deeper with each passing campaign, and Konrad Curze found himself bleeding alone in the dark. The void where his brother's counsel once echoed now filled with the susurrus of his own fractured thoughts. Each whispered justification for the horrors he orchestrated met with the cold certainty of his visions. Those visions, more vivid than reality, painted the Imperium's future in shades of betrayal and despair, a future only he could see, and only he could prevent through the purification of fear. The Night Lords, sensing his retreat from the dim light of camaraderie, sought to please their shadowed father with ever more elaborate displays of terror, their campaigns becoming a grotesque ballet of suffering. The message was no longer enough. The medium was now the art. The very act of breaking resistance became sacred, the mutilated victims reshaped into living monuments to pain, their screams echoing across the void as a warning to all who might defy the Emperor's will. But the Emperor's will was becoming a distant memory, a tattered banner in the howling storm of Curze's conviction. The Imperium, for all its glorious conquests under the light-bringing legions, still crawled with the rot of the dark, the unspoken truths festering beneath the facade of unity. The Night Lords, despised and feared, became the Imperium's own shadow, the Emperor's hand dipped in the deepest, blackest ink, the whispered threat that held the fragile peace in trembling balance. Behave, or the Night Lords will come for you. 100 worlds whispered it, their nightmares a new kind of obedience. But the victories, the bloodless surrenders, the corridors of the outer worlds made silent and compliant, only deepened the marrow of the 8th Legion's hollowing soul. The Imperium, built on the lie of the Emperor's nobility, the lie of the imperial truth, could not be sustained by the broken promises of the Night Lords. They were not the architects of civilization, only the architects of fear. Curze, locked in his private hell of prophetic certainty, no longer saw the difference between these two things. The world that had shaped him, the crucible of his own bloody birth, began to rot in his absence, its corruption a mirror of his own worst fears. Nostramo, the city of shadows, the white-knuckled grip of his rule, was already slipping. The first betrayals, the first avaricious whispers, the first small compromises of the enforcers he had left behind, those were small cracks in the glass. The agents of the law, the judges and the justiciars had been forged in the furnace of his iron will, but they had human hearts, hearts that could be bribed, hearts that could be tempted, hearts that whispered the first treasonous thought, we are not being watched. The crime lords, those who had survived the night haunters, reigned by hiding, not by reforming, smelled the first sweet scent of weakness. They emerged from the sewers, from the underhives, from the forgotten corners of forgotten cities, like rats in the dark. They tested the waters, their carefully constructed lies, their bribes, their threats, their small cruelties against the weak. When the lightning did not strike, the entire city of Nostramo seemed to exhale, and the first shadows of the old order began to creep back into the light. The wealth that had once flowed through the veins of that world, however meager it was was siphoned off into the pockets of the new aristocracy, same predators who had lurked in the shadows before Curze's rise, now dressed in the robes of office. Their hypocrisy was almost beautiful. They enforced the letter of the law, but corrupted its spirit with every word, every action, every whisper that promised a return to the old ways. They were the same as the monsters they had once replaced, but worse because they were afraid. The corruption of the planet was a slow, creeping disease, a poison that could not be seen by the naked eye, but felt in the trembling of the late-night streets, the unspoken fear in the eyes of the convicts, the sudden, unexplained disappearances. Night Lords, the conquerors, the warriors of terror, the distant sons of a dying world, began to take in their newest recruits. Their faces were not the same faces. The new recruits were not the children of the streets who had been hardened by the necessity of survival, but the children of the predators who had once made Curze's knife as sharp and as necessary. They were born into the world he had made, but they learned the lessons of the old world. They learned cruelty, not as a tool, but as a way of life. They learned to control the weak, not through the strength of fear, but through the fear of strength. They learned to love the pain they inflicted. The first signs were subtle. A new recruit, a young man with bright eyes, eager to take a prisoner's tongue, even as a captain ordered him to stand down. A veteran, a Terran, the last of the old breed, the one who had been raised in the prison pits of Terra, the one who had believed in Curze's terrible vision of order through fear, would whisper a warning to the others. This one is different. The young men, the new Nostramo recruits, began to see the Night Lords not as a legion of the Imperium, but as a brotherhood of predators, a pack of killers without restraint. They saw the shadows of their own fathers, the men who had ruled the streets before the coming of the Night Haunter. They were not the men who had been brutalized by the world they lived in and had to fight back. They were the men who had brutalized the world. The Legion, the once unified force of terror, began to fracture along the lines of its birth. The Terran veterans, their voices hoarse, their hearts hardened but their principles intact, tried to maintain the discipline of terror, the razor's edge between necessity and savagery. The new recruits, the ones who had never known true fear, pushed for the thrill of the knife, the rush of the uncontrolled kill. Curze, cursed by the visions that filled his waking moments, saw the cracks in his legion, but could not see a way to mend them. Every report from Nostramo, every word of the corruption that had seeped back into its veins, felt like a confirmation of his prophetic visions. The world was dark, and it would always be dark. His efforts to cleanse it, to bring order through fear, were as futile as trying to hold back the tide with his bare hands. And so he withdrew further into the shadows of his own mind and his own ship, his pale face gaunt, his eyes hollow, his voice a whisper of despair. The Legion, the sons of the Night Haunter, began to drift. The final confrontation with his brothers, the moment of his undoing, came in the Charout system, amidst the clash of three very different legions. The Emperor's children with their pursuit of perfection, their elegant violence, their music of the blade. The Imperial fists, their stoic resolve, their unbreakable walls of determination, and their unwavering faith in the Emperor's vision. And then the Night Lords, the artists of the unspeakable, the architects of fear. The differences between them were a chasm of philosophy and understanding. Dorn, the primarch of the Imperial fists, saw the true face of what the Night Lords had become, and he recoiled with a disgust that hardened into cold fury. To him, war was a science, a strategic necessity, a thing to be endured with discipline and honor. To Curze, the violence was a language, a visceral truth that broke the mind and the will of the friction between the legions, between the warriors who saw the galaxy as a puzzle to be solved, and the warriors who saw it as a rotting carcass to be devoured, became an open wound. When Curze in his madness saw the final betrayal, the great heresy that would tear the Imperium apart, the vision that would forever haunt him, Dorn standing amidst the ruins of his own defenses, his own failure saw his brother's face, and in that moment he spoke. Words came out as a scream, a torrent of accusations, of prophecies of doom. Dorn, who had never known the burden of the visions, the agony of the foresight, saw only the ravings of a madman. The cracks in the Imperium, the cracks that Curze had foreseen, were now exposed. The Primarchs, the guardians of the Emperor's vision, could not tolerate the madness of one of their own. Curze, who had been their brother, the savior, the monster, was now confined, his own sons, his own legion, being forced to guard him. But the act of confinement, meant as a mercy, a pause, was seen as a betrayal by the crawling shadows of the Night Haunter's mind. The guards were slaughtered, their bodies left as a message to the brothers who had imprisoned him. Curze vanished into the darkness, his mind a shattered mirror of prophesied doom. The Legion, the Sons of the Night, the terror of the Imperium, were now broken, their father gone, their purpose shattered. They saw the Imperium not as a home, not as a brotherhood, but as a cage. The Terran veterans, their voices of reason, were drowned out by the rising tide of the new recruits, the ones who saw the world as a predator's playground. The wound in the Legion's psyche festered, poisoned by the whispers of betrayal. Curze, the broken man, the ghost in the shadows, retreated to his flagship, wrapping himself in the darkness of his own thoughts. The reports of Nostromo's fall, the corruption, the decay, the betrayal of the world he had once saved, fell upon him like the final hammer blow. His vision of the future was now confirmed. The world was dark, and it would always be dark, so he would give it to the darkness. The fleet returned to Nostramo, the planet that had birthed him, the place that had shaped him. He did not land, did not seek to understand the nuances of the decay, the possibility of redemption. He saw only the final lesson, the ultimate truth that he had been trying to teach all along. Behold the futility of law. The guns of the Night Lords, the ships of terror, the instruments of the Emperor's justice, turned their aim towards the heart of the world. The very crater where the Primarch, as a child, had been cast into the darkness, the fragile point of the planet's crust, was targeted. The lance batteries fired, their light cutting through the void of space, the beams of energy tearing through the fragile crust, piercing the molten heart of the world. Nostramo began to die. It was not a quick death, but an agonizing, slow, tortured collapse, the planet's skin tearing open like the flesh of a dying god. The world, the very vessel of his birth, the proof of his failure, the testament to his brother's betrayal, the embodiment of his despair, the very symbol of the darkness that could never be tamed, was ripped apart before his eyes. Billions died, screaming as the fires of the planet's core consumed the flesh, the bones, the entire history of the world that had made him. The guilty and the innocent alike, the corrupt and the pure, all were consumed in the same fire, the same judgment, the same hopelessness of Curze's vision. The world that had been his home, the place where the Night Lords had been born, was now nothing but a garden of shattered rock and ash. The last lesson was finally learned. The seeds of the tragedy, the harvesting of the 8th Legion's soul, were now complete. Night Haunter, standing alone amidst the ruins of what he had built, the destruction of his own past, the destruction of the Imperium's future, was now truly the monster he had always been. The Night Lords, freed from the illusion of their place in the Imperium, now adrift in the void of their own despair, their own purpose, found their own truth. The darkness was coming, and in the end, they would be the only thing that could stand against it. The only way to fight the coming darkness was to become the darkness itself. The world died in silence, a cold darkness that had cradled it since birth, now swallowing it whole. Nostramo, jewel of the deep void, its obsidian spires etched with the blood of dynasties, shattered into the uncaring emptiness of space. Its final moments unfolded like a perverse sacrament to the legions that watched from the blackness of their ships, the Night Lords gazing upon the death throes of their home, as the last flickers of the planet's molten core pulsed through the cracking crust, like a dying god's last heartbeat. The wretched, the profiteers, the desperate souls who had clawed their way through the planet's corruption damned, and the brutal alike vanished into the void in a single breath. The end was nothing less than the planet had earned, a grotesque, violent finale, a mirror of the life it had nurtured. For the Imperium, the shockwaves were less physical than political, a tremor that rattled the marrow of its hypocrisy. The Emperor's own son had condemned a world now his by right of conquest, and the Imperium's horror was a brittle thing, built on the lie that the Primarchs were tools of order, not harbingers of justice. The reports were delivered in stony silence, the Emperor's face unmoving as a statue, but within the Council of Terra, rage erupted in whispers and hushed proclamations. This was no mere crime, this was a fracture, a line crossed in the dark. The power granted by the throne had been used to rend the fabric of its own authority, a Primarch striking not for conquest but catharsis. Curze had not waited for the Emperor's judgment, nor the Council's censure. He had acted as a force of the galaxy's own cruel calculus, and the audacity of it certainly left a bitter aftertaste in the mouths of the powerful. The sanctions were predictable but hollow. The 8th Legion was recalled, their supply lines severed, their recruitment rights revoked, reprimands inked on parchment, punishments. But the 8th Legion, steeped in shadows, their armor stained with the blood of compliance, their very souls fed on the terror of their purpose, had long since divorced themselves from the need for imperial approval. Those who had been cast out could not be made to suffer exile. They were already there. Konrad Curze, the Night Haunter, greeted the censure with a smile like a knife wound. The Primarch's mind, once a labyrinth of meticulously ordered cruelty, now trembled with fractures. The planet's destruction had been but a prelude to the visions that gnawed at him, waking or sleeping. The Emperor's judgment was a decree he had seen in his fractured mind 1,000 times over. He stood before the council, his voice a hollow rasp, his gaunt frame a testament to sleepless nights and the weight of his knowledge. The council's chambers were a place of light and gold, relics of the imperial truth, but Curze stood in their midst as a shard of darkness. Nostramo had been a rot, a wound that would have festered into the heart of the crusade, he explained, his voice a blade slicing through their false piety. The Imperium demanded order, but shrank from the horror required to create it. The hypocrisy of the council, their demand for vicious obedience, their refusal to acknowledge the dark hands that made it possible, left him unmoved by their outrage. His departure from Terra was a final severing, a blade drawn through the last thread of kinship. The Night Haunter boarded his ship. His escorts, the sons of Nostramo, their faces hidden behind the stoic masks of their helms, felt nothing but the coldness of their own purpose. The visions followed him, relentless. They no longer waited for him to sleep, but seized him in the corridors of his command ship, the Shatter of the Dark, the sheer weight of them collapsing his towering frame to its knees. He would lie curled in the dark, his talons, gouged, scraping the floor, his voice a broken whisper of the horrors to commit brother turning against brother, the betrayal of the Imperium and the final burning of the stars. The Legion, the vaunted Night Lords, their once-great coherence shattered, struggled to find who they were under his command. Orders were given in whispers, contradicted in screams. The captains of the Legion, many of the Terran Old Guard, tried to maintain the Imperial truth within their own labyrinthine ways, but their primarch, the once and always guiding Lightno, a ghost of the man they once knew, had become a ghost within his own legion. The sons of the 8th Legion, once the arbiters of Imperial justice, now drifted through the galaxy's edges. Their ships, the Warrior's Woe, the Crimson Knell, the Blade of Midnight, became little more than whispers in the void. Some compliance operations were conducted with pragmatic efficiency, brutal as they had always been, but others were acts of terror, their rationale unclear. It was no campaign, no justice. The Legion, the 8th Legion, was becoming a thing of the night, a nursery of the repressed, and the Imperium, the very machine they had once served, began to forget the monsters they were. In the years that followed, the Night Lords became a ghost story, a tale told to frighten the worlds that the Crusade reached. They arrived in the dark, their midnight blue armor blending with the shadows, their presence a herald of death, their independence a thing Imperial commanders could no longer predict. The Loyalists, who had once petitioned for their aid in the darkest of tasks, now hesitated. When would the Night Lords arrive? Whose side would they be on when they did? The gray zone between loyalty and the blackness of treachery, held by the 8th Legion, grew thinner. Their bonds were stretched thin, their loyalty to the Imperium a thing of the past, the future. Then the news came not from the Imperial command, but from the whispers of the astropathic dead, the garbled vox screens, the shattered loyalist ships fleeing the edges of the galaxy. The War Master, the beloved Horus Lupercal, the brightest star among the Primarchs, had turned. Horus, the beloved son of the Emperor, had rebelled. The truth of the heresy was no surprise to Curze, for the Night Haunter, huddled in his darkened chambers, had seen what was coming in 1,000 nightmares. The visions, the screaming, the burning War Master Horus had been the architect of the apocalypse ever since Curze had been found on the dark streets of Nostramo. The Emperor and the War Master, the two of them, the father and the son, the struggle and the inevitable fall. Curze, the Night Haunter, the ignored prophet of mankind's doom, the killer of the oppressed, the martyr of the damned, the conscience of the galaxy, the only one who had seen the truth, had been right. The choice was no choice. It was a confirmation. The War Master Horus solicited not through the Imperial channels, but through secret communiques, the whispers of bounce-betrothed messengers. Recognition was a balm, cold and bitter and sweet. Horus the War Master understood the Eight's purpose. He saw the truth, that the Imperial truth was false, and that the Night Lords were the shadow that was always there, the necessary evil hidden in the cracks of the Emperor's lying dream. Curze, the Night Haunter, the Lord of the 8th Legion, sent his emissaries back to the War Master. The message was simple: we will act as we are. Through the Legion, the news spread through shadows, whispers, the glint of understanding. The Terran veterans, the few who had survived the first purges, who remembered the Legion's purpose as a force of the Emperor's fearsome justice, the ultima ratio of the Imperial truth, knew that their path was a noose. But they were silent. The Legion, the sons of the Night Haunter, had always been the servants of their father's vision, however dark. The Night Lords, the Eight, the children of the night, the sons of the underworld, the killers, the torturers, the monsters, claimed their place in the ranks of the War Master's traitors. The preparations for Istvan V were a thing of the Legion's implacable efficiency. The ships were made ready, their weapons and armor, their knives and terror blades repaired and sharpened. The cities of the Loyalists, the Iron Hands, the Raven Guard, the Salamanders, would be reduced to ash and despair. The Legion, the Night Lords, approached the battle like a midnight execution, silent and efficient. There was no joy in their hearts, no anticipation of the coming chaos, only the cold certainty of what was needed. The hypocrisy of the Emperor, the lies of the Imperial truth would be exposed, and the lies would be bled, screamed, and burned into the flesh of the Imperium by the very hands that had enforced it. The Night Haunter emerged from the shadows, his presence a tangible thing, a living force, guiding his sons to the battlefield of Istvan V. The dark sands of the planet's surface, a black, skittering thing, were the first to greet him, the first act of the tragedy. The three loyal legions, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, the Fires of the Betrayed, the warriors of the Emperor's dying light, were retreating, their backs turned, their faith in the concept of the Imperium, in the very idea of loyalty, the chain that would choke them. The Night Lords had been waiting. The Night Lords, the 8th Legion, the sons of the Night Haunter, the monsters of the Imperium, the killers of Nostramo, the betrayers of the Crusade, stood in the sand, their midnight blue armor blending with the non-existent night, their red eyes like the lenses of their helms, the only thing glowing in the falling light. The signal came. The Night Lords, the sons of the Night Haunter, the sons of the Imperium, the sons of Horus, fell upon the retreating loyalists. First targets were not the soldiers at the front, but the weak links in the chain of order: the apothecaries tending to the wounded, the Vox operators screaming for help, the medics, the engineers, the hope of the loyalists. The Night Lords slaughtered them with an efficiency, a precision that spoke of the years of preparation. The Night Lords, the sons of the Night Haunter, the Primarch's blades, the Emperor's forgotten tools of justice, the Imperium's own monsters, the monsters of the Crusade, embraced their own pain. Then the screams. The Vox screens of the entire Imperium, the loyalists and the traitors alike, were filled with the screams of the dying. The Night Lords had modified their jump packs, their raptors flying through the air, their claws tearing through battle plate, the screams of their engines, the howls of their own Voxgestress, a symphony of terror. The loyalists, the men who had been the Iron Hands, the stoic warriors of Vulcan, the noble sons of Korax, were broken, not by the strength of their enemies, but by their very nature. The horror, the very image of the Imperium, invoking the monsters it had created to destroy them. The Night Haunter, Konrad Curze, watched from the ridges, his eyes like a raven, his face gaunt, starving, a mask of the damnation. The visions were playing out, as he had seen them in his nightmares, in the last days of Nostramo, in the last nightmares of the dying light, the last flickers of the Imperium, dead. The loyalty, the hypocrisy, the lieth truth, the true truth was that the galaxy was a damned place, and the only justice was the one he had preached. The atrocity, the massacre of Istvan, the betrayal of the loyalists, was not an act of cruelty, but an act of truth. The Emperor, the Father, the Tyrant had created a galaxy of darkness, and the Night Lords, the sons of Curze, the Night Haunter, the Primarch, the Monster, the Judge, the Executioner, were the living proof of his hypocrisy. The dust of Istvan settled, the last of the loyalists, the Iron Hands, the Raven Guard, the Salamanders, dead or dying, the last hope of the 3 legions bleeding into the black sand. The Night Lords regrouped, their armor stained with the blood of the betrayed, their blades, their claws, their weapons, their tools of justice, the tools of the Night Haunter, the Primarch, the Father, the Monster, the Judge, the Executioner. The Night Lords, the 8th Legion, stood on the precipice of history. They had crossed the threshold, and the world they had known, the Imperium, the galaxy, was dead. The future the one Curze, the Night Haunter, had always seen, had always been his certainty, was now. The 8th Legion, the Night Lords, the sons of Nostramo, the sons of the Night Haunter, the Primarch, the Judge, the Executioner, the Monster, were the future of the horror. The galaxy would burn. And the Night Haunter, Konrad Curze, finally, his shattered mind between the jagged edges of his visions, found peace. The path of the future was laid out before him, the steps he had always known, the inevitability he had always dreaded. The struggle, the fight against the visions, the agony of the future, the horror of the truth, the screaming, the burning weight of the future was gone. The burden was lifted. The Night Lords would return to their ships. Their savage, the vengeful spirit's heart pulsed with the slow, heavy rhythm of its ancient engines, air thick with incense and the subtle musk of treachery, as Horus Lupercal's gaze fell upon his brother's shadowed silhouette. The War Master's voice was velvet, honeyed with a predator's certainty, a sonorous command promising the future to those who dared to serve its darkest designs. Konrad Curze stood before him, a nightmare made flesh, a figure already frayed at the edges, his mind a labyrinth of visions and the blood that had painted them. Horus, golden in his hubris, laid out his vision for the 8th Legion. They were to be the whisper in the dark, the instrument of the terror that would coil around the Thramas sector like a serpent's strangling grip. The plan was a blade's edge, sharp, precise, and merciless. Divide the dark angels from Terra, let the lion chase shadows while the final blow to the Imperium was struck. Curze's pale eyes narrowed, not with the fire of ambition, but the cold calculation of a predator acknowledging the scent of prey. Horus saw the value the Night Lords could not relinquish, the terror they embodied, the fear that would buckle the knees of the East. The vengeful spirit's walls bore witness to the pact between broken gods and broken Mina pact that would send the 8th Legion into the void, to sow the seeds of a ruin that would bloom long after the first blow was struck. The eastern fringe of the Imperium unfurled before them, a tapestry of forge worlds and nameless systems, each a potential star in the bloody constellation of Horus's design. The Night Lords descended upon the Thramas sector as a storm of blades and whispers, their first strikes not against the fortresses of the enemy, but the fragile sanity of those who ruled them. Terror was not a tactic, it was a language, a symphony of the grotesque, each note played to perfection. Governors were offered the impossibly a choice between surrender, absolute, and the horror of witnessing their own people reduced to carrion, their screams echoing across the void. The Night Lords, draped in their pall of shadows, did not conquer, they unmade. They did not shatter cities, they shattered the will to live in them. The tormented, the broken, the survivors were let loose to whisper their tales, their horror staining the air like a plague, the 8th Legion's name becoming a curse. Those who resisted learned the truth of the Night Haunter's justice, their suffering becoming a beacon for others who would choose compliance over annihilation. beneath the surface of this calculated efficiency, the Legion was rotting, its core fracturing along the lines of its own poisoned history, a schism between the old and the new, the Terran born and the sons of the dead Nostramo. The ancient Terran veterans, the grizzled praetors of the illuminated night, remembrancers of the Great Crusade's distant ideals, watched the slow descent. They understood the blade's balanced necessity of terror, the necessity of control. Now they saw the rot setting in the tactics of the Nostramo youth, the thrill-seekers who had inhaled the last vapors of a dying world and spat them back as a creed of violence without purpose. The red gauntlet, once a symbol of measured fury, became a battle standard, proudly hoisted by those who still believed in Curze's original Crusade terror of an instrument of justice, a hammer to strike those who would defy the Imperium's dark order. The cross of bone, the emblem of the damned, the nihilists, soon took its place beside the gauntlet, their bearers' creed sympathy killed for the joy of it, the pain they inflicted, the ecstasy of watching the void consume the light. The Legion's internal war was a score of knives and the questions they were forged to answer. What are we, the shadow of the Imperium, or the shadow that the Imperium cast out? Justice, the merciless, or the simple, the corrupted, the predator? The question was the wound, the answer was the blood that would drown it. Jago Sevatarian, first captain in the last bridge between the maddened Primarch and the fractured Legion, bore the weight of this knowledge like a knife in his own soul. He remembered the Curze who had spoken of justice, his Primarch, his father, his Grim, the twin of the Night Haunter, the same and yet different. The same blood that coursed through his own veins was soaked in the twin visions, the one that saw the world as a place of judgment, the other as a nightmare of the inevitable. The Thrama's crusade, their bloody dance with the lion, was the crucible, and Sevatar watched as the already fragile balance within Curze tipped further towards the abyss. Days of isolation, the Primarch curled in his dark chambers, his fingers tracing the patterns of his visions on walls, the stone weeping with the etchings of shadows. The visions would be interspersed, in moments of unnerving clarity, the lucidity of a man who still saw the shape of his own fall. Those moments when Curze, not the haunter, would emerge, his voice cold and precise, questioning the excesses, demanding a measure of proportionality. I remember the purpose, the purpose. The words were pain then, as if the weight of the truth was too heavy, but in them, the chance to pull the Legion back. Sevatar, the voice of the old guard, would seize those moments, would try to drag the Primarch, the Legion, back from the precipice of becoming nothing but sadists. But the lucid moments were fleeting, the time between them stretching longer and longer, the blood of the tortured, the sounds of the dying, the darkness that would overtake the mind, the visions, the weight of the inevitable, the future that was already written, the future that would not be changed. The Night Haunter emerged, and the Primarch retreated, the face of the Legion, the strategist, the broken mind, his hands, long, his once elegant, now stained with the blood of the prisoners he flayed, the screams of those who were butchered to drown out the voices in his own head, the only respite from the visions that would not be stopped. The war, the Thramas, became a spread of the pain, not the victory, the terror of the purpose, but the purpose of the terror. The lion, the first of the Primarchs, and the one whose name, the lion's name, would be the final nail in the coffin of the 8th Legion, arrived in the Thramas sector. Horus, the schemer, had achieved his goal. The Dark Angels, the greatest of the Legion Astartes, were diverted, but the coming of the lion was a storm that was never meant to be weathered by a legion already tearing itself apart. The lion's strategy of honor, the precision of the blade, the discipline of the First Legion, was a thunderclap that shattered the brittle, shambling order of the Night Lords. The Dark Angels, the legion like a phalanx, moved as one, their blades held in the hand of the same purpose, their objectives clear, their methods unshakable. The Night Lords struck, their presence a shadow across the void, but their targets were scattered, their own captains, their own companies, in pursuit of personal glory in the hunt for the thrill of the kill, the chaos of the moment. The lion, the master of the blade, saw the openings and moved through them like a river through the cracks. The 8th Legion, once a force that could be wielded by the will of its Primarch, was now a collection of broken shards, each reflecting a different facet of the same madness. The strategies, the cunning of the corrupter in Sevatar, were ignored by the captains who had chosen their own path of the cross of bone, the path of the nihilism that would consume them all. World after world fell to the lion's relentless advance, the Dark Angels like a mountain of the truth, the Night Lords, the shadow of the fear, dispersing, retreating, crumbling, their shadow, their terror, their intangible, their weapon, the essence of their terror, the tool of the choice, the moment of the surrender, the uselessness of the fear, when the lion would not bow, would not flinch, his blade, his truth, his discipline, an unyielding wall of adamantium, against which the terror of the Night Lords shattered. The whispers of the legions collapsed, the rumors of the Primarch, Curze, locked away in his fortress of Tagalsa, the walls of his chambers, a tapestry of his own visions, carved in stone, the prophecy of the doom, the future that he could not escape, the fate that he would not be the one to seize. The reports, the war, the news, the slow, the implacable advance of the lion were ignored. Primarch of the Night Lords, the once the judge, the haunter, retreated into the realm of his own mind, deaf to the voices of the sons, blind to the dissolution of the force that was to be his vengeance, the embodiment of the justice that he believed was the truth. The faithful, the few, the veterans, the sons of the laurel, they whispered, "Is he weak? Is he broken? Is he the trap unsprung, the master of the shadows, waiting for the moment of the lion's downfall?" The truth was found in the blood, the void, the beacon, the coordinates, the call, the summons, the duel, the challenge, the meeting between the brothers, the two who had walked the same path, but now the precipice, the chasm between them. The lion noble, the strategist, accepting the possibility of the trap, the possibility of the victory, the need to seize chance, to strike, to kill, to break the chain that bound the Night Lords to Horus, the chance to end the war in the East, to bring Curze, the traitor, to the Emperor's justice, to the Emperor, the final, the truth. Curze, the Night Haunter, the troubled, the furious, the inevitability, believing that the lion, the same, the tool, the pawn, the one who would not see the truth, the horror of the Imperium, the horror of the Emperor, the lie that they all had fought for. The lion came, the lion, the noble, the strategist, came with a small honor guard, the same as Curze. Meeting, the first words, the old civility, the brief reminder of the shared past, shattered, the moment, the words, the lion's rage, the Night Haunter's venomous words, the Emperor, the false king, the lie, the darkness, the same as the corruption, the purpose, the meaning, the heart of the crusade, the heart of the Imperium, the lie that they were his servants, that they were free, the Emperor, the creature, the power, the fear, the architect of the misery, the death. The same as the terror, the same as the Night Haunter's own lion's blade, the lion's strike, the eruption of the violence, the meeting of the brothers, the unbreakable, the lion, the disciplined, the warrior, the perfect of the blade, the perfect of the martial, the Night Haunter, the desperate, the fury, the chaos, the unpredictable, the dance of the blades, the dance that became a brawl, became a brutal, primal contest of the strength, the fury, the hatred, the truth of the two, the lion. The embodiment of the control, the Night Haunter, the embodiment of the chaos. The lion's hands, the grip on the throat, the Night Haunter, the strength of the despair, the strength of the inevitability, the lion's eyes, the moment of the blade, the thrust from the back, the dark angel's honor guard, the bravery, the treachery, the blade that pierced the Curze back, the surprise, the agony, the lion's retaliation, the lion's strike, the lion's wrath, the wounds that would have broken, the Curze, the broken Curze, but standing, the defiance. Even in the defeat, the moment, the banter, the reinforcements, the retreat, the withdrawal, the battle, undone, the fuse, the fragmentation, the beginning of the end. The news of the Primarch, the Curze defeat, spread through the Legion like venom, the very essence of the Night Lords unraveling, the bonds of loyalty, the loyalty to the cause, the loyalty to the Father, the loyalty to the Legion, shattered. The whispers of the victory, the whispers of the possibility, the hope, the belief, the commitment to the Red Gauntlet, the purpose, the justice, the terror, the tool of the greater purpose, the cross of the bone, the nihilism, the survival of the fittest, the survival of the strongest, the fear of the others, the fear as the only truth, the false truth, became the only creed. The Legion, the once cohesive, the shadow of the purpose, now scattered, the captains, the companies, the warring against each other, the dark angels, the lions, the relentless advance, the unstoppable, the progress, the world after the world, the shattered, the broken, the waste, the ruin, the Night Lords, the shadow of the shadow, the terror of the terror, the fear of the fear, becoming nothing but the whispers of the past, the ghosts of the future, the Legion that was no more the Legion. Only the name, the Night Lords, the last bolt, the last shot, the last desperate charge, the companies, the K, the Curze, the last attempt, the rescue of the Primarch, to the rescue of the Father, the feudal, the sacrifice, the last order, the last command from the command that was no more, the corrupt, the seveter, the last of the old guard. The last who saw the truth of the Legion, the truth of the Primarch, the truth of the inevitable fall. The lion in the final battle, the battle of the shawl, the lion's the truth, the strength, the discipline, the lion breaking the Curze spine, the moment, the snap, the noise, the sound, the echo of the heresy, the echo of the fall of the Legion, the fall of the Primarch, the capture of the Curze, the chains of the adamantium. The chains of the truth, the chains of the lion's victory, the chains of the Emperor's justice, the chains of the invincible reason, the flagship of the dark angels, the vessel of the truth, the truth of the lion's victory, the truth of the lion's truth against the Curze, the Night Haunter, the broken body, the healing, the slow process of the healing, the mind. Mind, the mind, the mind, the mind, the visions, the visions, the visions, the nightmares, the nightmares, the nightmares, the broken, the bones, the bones, the bones, the bones, the bones, the bones, the eternal, the eternal, the eternal, the eternal, the bastard, the bastard, the bastard, the prisoner, the victim, the madman, the prophet, the truth of the heresy, the truth of the future that was already written, the truth that he had seen, the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth. The truth, 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 the truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. Truth, the 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 truth. truth, the 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 truth. The truth, 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 and the truth. The truth was that the dark angels, the lion, believed they had won. Broken, the night haunter chained. The legion, 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 the legion. The legion, 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 offered the legion no more than a hollow shell, a vessel for the horrors that would come. The legion was gone, forgot, the sons of the night, the sons of the dark, the sons of the terror, the sons of the 10th legion, the sons of the 10th legion. The Night Lords, the once the 8th legion, the once the pride and terror, were now nothing but the ghosts of the past, the echoes of the future, the whispers in the void, the last legacy of the heresy, the last of the truth of the inevitable fall, the truth of the future that was written, the truth that the Curze, the night haunter, the prophet, the broken, the prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. Prisoner, the 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 prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, 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 the prisoner. The prisoner, the prisoner, the prisoner, to the Emperor's Justicia twisted Machariedmunded the Night Haunter's cage, bound in chains of adamantium, guarded by the finest warriors, their every step a testament to grim duty, their every breath laced with a tension that hummed through the ship's hull like a dying star's final scream. The dark angels, ever loyal, ever certain of their purpose, marched through the vessel's bone-white halls, their armor immaculate, their hearts heavy with the weight of their captive's shadow. They had hauled Konrad Curze into their sacred halls, a trophy of righteous vengeance, a living testament to their own unshakable loyalty to a distant throne. But what they had taken aboard was not a prisoner, but a storm wrapped in the shape of a monostorm that had merely begun to stretch its claws. The Lion's warriors, their faith in the Emperor's light as unyielding as their ceramite, could not see the rot spreading like a slow bleed through the very air, the whispers that curled like smoke from the voxgrills, the shadows that crept into the corners of their vision when they were brave enough to look away. Curze, shackled and silent, did not move to escape. Instead, he let the darkness seep out of him, like oil from a cracked vessel, pooling in the minds of those who had dared to call themselves his jailers. The first signs of his presence were subtle, almost playful echo of a name whispered in a ventilation shaft long after the servant had been scrubbed to silence, a flicker of movement in the reflection of a polished bulkhead where the space was empty, the sound of laughter soft, wet, like blood on stone when the Vigilance's engines cycled to their lowest hum. The Night Haunter's presence was insidious, a poison that did not need open wounds. Maintenance crews discovered the remnants of their rations arranged in a spiral, each scrap of meat and hardtack pointing to the central chamber where the Primarch lay bound. Sergeant Valerius found his own knife, the blade he had forged in the furnace of the Legion's forge, embedded in the deck outside his quarters, its hilt wrapped in the skin of his deceased son's pick folder of memory that had been locked in his private vault, sealed with his own blood key. The Lion's edicts turned to frantic orders, his voice booming through the ship like a storm god's wrath. But the light of the lumen strips only deepened the shadows in the corners, and the doubling of guards merely made the absence more acute when the next death came, each warrior dying in the exact manner Curze had described in his hollow voice, his face pressed to the cell's barricade as they passed. The Night Haunter never spoke, not until he wished to speak, and when he did, it was not to the commanders, but to the lowliest, the forgotten, the ones who had already begun to doubt. The scout who had seen his own death in the curve of the Primarch's smile, the one who had been told his last thought would be the taste of his own blood. The loyalty was not shattered, but bent, and each bend, each crack, was a new opening for the terror to seep in. The Vigilance became a fortress for the living dead, a vessel where the walls were no longer barriers, but conduits for the nightmare to spread. The Lion's discipline was iron, but even iron rusts when exposed to the right kind of venom. The whispers grew louder in the corridors, the crewmates' eyes darting away when they met another's gaze, a silent question, had you heard it too? Then came the stormed one that would swallow the Galaxide ruinous storm, as it was called in the channels of the damned, a tempest of warp and rage that tore the Imperium in two, severing pathways, cutting the Lion's fleet from the Throneworld's light. The final decision was born of necessity, not of choice. The Dark Angels, adrift, cut off from the sun, their beacon the alien device, the Pharos, a beacon to guide them through the mire of the warp. The navigators, blind and mad, wept in their chambers as the ship's hull groaned under the weight of the void's chaos, and the librarians, their faces pale, their voices trembling, whispered of the whispers that the storm had brought, same as the ones that skittered through the ship's corridors, same voice that had called them to Ultramar, to the false sanctuary of Macragge. The Lion's face was grim as he stood upon the bridge, the storm's reflection warping his features in the viewport, his eyes fixed on the Pharos' light, a beacon he had no choice but to follow. The Vigilance broke through the tempest's grasp, emerging into a system that still hummed with the false comfort of civility, its skies blue and mocking, its people proud of their ordered world. The Emperor's lighter, so they thought, still shone upon this realm. The Lion's warriors, their armor scuffed, their resolve brittle, watched as the ship's docking clamps engaged with the port of Macragge, the air of Ultramar cool and sterile despite the weight of the past months. The primarchs Guilliman the Angel, the Lion were united in the moment of their reunion, a fragile moment of hope, a breath stolen from the jaws of the storm's chaos. No one had yet thought of the prisoner. No one had thought of the shadows that crept from the Vigilance's hull, the same shadows that had seeped into the very cells of the warriors, the same that had been allowed to fester never to be purged. The chains lay empty, the guards were cold, their throats slit in the dark, their eyes wide, reflecting the horror they had not been allowed to scream. The Night Haunter was gone, swallowed by the city of his new stage, Macragge's streets white and pristine as a tombstone, waiting for the first of the dead to rise. The first body was found 3 days later, a high magistrate, a man who had penned the laws of Imperium Secundus with his own hand, the very ink of his pen still wet with promises of the new order. They found him hanging from the gates of the Illustrium, his body carved into the shape of a question mark long, elegant lines of crimson, the open wounds forming a perfect arc of the universal symbol of doubt. The second body was his wife, her throat slit in the same manner, her eyes still open. A message. A warning. Gan the third, a serf no more than a child torn apart, limbs spread across the steps of the Hall of Judgment, the words written in the child's own blood. Why not? The whispers turned to screams, the city's perfect order fraying. The people of Macragge, locking their doors like the dead themselves, strode the streets, and the dead did not need to be seen. The Night Haunter needed only to be heard. The Voxcasters, silent and proud, the heralds of Ultramar's efficiency, were his next instrument of terror. They sang of the Emperor's demise, the fall of the throne world, the lies of the Guilliman, the Lion's weakness. Oh, the words were truth that had been withheld, the truth that the people of the Imperium Secundus, the new hope of the galaxy, had been sheltered from, the truth that the Lion, Guilliman, and Sanguinius III had been unwilling to share. The Night Haunter spoke it, and the whispers became screams, the screams became panic, and the panic spread like a cancer. The Lion's rage was palpable, his fists shaking as he paced the chamber, his voice a low growl. Guilliman the Angel, flinching at the violence in his tone. The Night Haunter had to be found, and he would, but the cost was a slow poison. The Lion's methods were brutal and swift, would hunt the shadows and pull the shadows apart. The governor of the Imperium, Suleiman, was a man of pride, his loyalty to the Imperium Secundus unquestioned, until the whispers came, and then the whispers came from his own mouth. His voice, broken and twisted, spoke of Curze, of the need to cleanse the corruption, and the Lion's response was to press the orbital bombardment. The city of Imperium, built upon the bones of the system's past, a jewel of the new order, would be razed to the ground to root out the corruption. The words were spoken in the cold logic of the commander, the Lion's voice a cold blade, his gaze unwavering. Guilliman, the architect of the new order, the man whose very soul was bound to the idea of civility, raged with a fury that shocked even his own brothers. The city of Imperium, for all its corruption, its possible rebellion, could not be burned. The Imperium, even the false Imperium, was built on order, not rubble. The argument was the crack in the dam, the fissure in the foundations. The Lion's eyes blazed, his voice rising in a roar that shook the chamber's very walls. The Angel, his wings heavy with the weight of the future, the crown of his regency, closed his eyes. The Night Haunter had won. His victory was not in the blood, but in the division, the seed of doubt. The Lion's final chase was a blistering hunt, a game of the shadows, the Angel's whispers guiding him to the city of almonds, where the streets were lined with the dead, their eyes wide and staring, their faces frozen in the moment of Curze's touch. The Lion's blade found the Night Haunter's throat, the Primarch, the monster, hunched, his eyes black pools of nothing, his body a twisted shadow of the terror that had consumed the city. The Lion's breath was ragged, the weight of months pressing on his shoulders, his voice a hiss, demanding the answer to the question. Why betray the Emperor? Why the slaughter of the innocent? Why the terror? The Night Haunter's laughter was a low gurgle, his throat still pressed against the blade, and he answered in a whisper, a simple answer, a single word turned into a question. Why not? The Lion's blade pressed harder, the edge of it drawing blood, the first dark line of crimson, the tension in the air a palpable weight. The Night Haunter did not fight, he did not struggle. He merely waited, his eyes locked on the Lion's own, his question only one still echoing in the silence. The Lion's roar shattered the silence, his blade pulled back, the blow that would end it all, but the Angel's voice, soft, a hand on the Lion's shoulder, the press of the golden wings, stopped him. The trial was held, and the Night Haunter stood before the three, the broken man, the monster, the broken reflection of the Emperor's vision. The chamber was silent, the weight of the past days pressing on the air, the very air suffocating. The Night Haunter's defense was a knife, twisting in the hearts of his brothers. He was the Emperor's justice, he said, his voice a dry rasp, his eyes black pools of darkness, his words a hollow bell. The blade, the tool, the hand that guided atrocity when it was committed, was not the fault of the blade. The Guilliman's fist clenched, the Lion's gaze cold, his jaw tight, the Angel's wings sagging, his face a mask of sorrow. The Night Haunter's words the truth of the division. The secret of the Lion's plan, the Imperium's fate were spoken, and the Guilliman's face twisted in horror, the Lion's roar shaking the room. The courtroom, the trial, the truth, the angel's voice, the voice of mercy, the decision not to execute, but to imprisonto study the creature, the nightmare, the broken reflection of their own creation. The decision was a mercy, a fragile hope, a crack in the Night Haunter's prophecy. The future was not a prison, but a path. The journeyed decision to seek the truth was not a simple one. The ruined storm, the warp's chaos, the whispers of the navigator's madness, the weight of the past months. The Lion's eyes were cold, his voice a low growl, his refusal to accept the angel's hope. The decision was a shadow of the future, a gamble, a leap of faith. The angel's visioned hope that Davin would reveal the truth was taken, and worse, the Night Haunter, the broken shadow, was brought with them. The scene of the toothed angel and the Night Haunter alone in the cell was a moment of the past's weight. The broken man curled in darkness, his arms wrapped around his knees, his eyes black pools of madness, his whispers, his visions, his screams. The angel's wings, the light, the voice of the Golden One, the offer of hope with hope that the truth would set them free. The phantoms of the ship, the whispers of the mingling, the warp in reality, the storm's edge, the weight of the angel's words, the faintest of sparks the Night Haunter's eyes. For a moment, the blackness of madness, the flicker, perhaps the faintest of lights. The Imperium, the galaxy, the future reel of them were a storm, a fabric of the past and the future. The Night Haunter's words turned to the simplest of the truths. The future was not written. The past was not the prison. The path to Davin and the heart of the chaos was the final step. Until the Induntal, the last moment of the storm's truth was not known. Until the futureth moment when the first step was taken, darkness, the uncertainty, the future was not written. The future was not written. The storm was not over. The galaxy was still in the dark, and the flickered faintest of lights was the only spark. The universe shifted, its axis groaning, as Konrad Curze found himself untethered for the first time in his wretched existence, the ground beneath his soul crumbling into the vertiginous abyss of possibility. Choice, that terrible, glittering blade, plunged into the bedrock of his being, twisting the certainty he had carried like a sacred burden. The air tasted like rusted metal, his head swimming with the alien sensation of potential futures, each one rippling, flickering, indistinguishable from the next. He braced himself against the cold stone of the pillar, its surface like the skin of some long-dead leviathan, his fingers trembling like those of a child stumbling upon the corpse of a god. The world was reforging itself around Hema Molten. Chaotic Thingen the Night Haunter watched, hollow-eyed, as his own reflection shattered in the shards of the future he had believed unshakable. Sanguinius's gaze pierced through the haze of his confusion, golden wings folding the shadowed air between them, understanding the weight of this moment with the clarity of a saint. The angel's sorrow was not a blade, but a balm, a recognition. This was a crisis of faith, not in the divine, but in the iron cage of determinism that had been Curze's only compass. The prophecies, the visions, the blood-soaked tapestry of his life, all of it was a lie, or worse, a choice. The implications were a storm of saw blades in his chest. If he could have been wrong, if the future was mutable, then the screams of his victims, the cities drowned in the black bile of his justice, the children torn apart for their fathers, since all of it was not a preordained sacrifice but an indulgence. The weight of it crushed him, a galaxy of corpses pressing down on his shoulders, each shrieking the same question. Why? The demon Maedil's laughter was a symphony of razors, but the confrontation tore through the Night Haunter's soul sharper than any claw. The battlefield was a charnel house, a theater of the damned, where reality itself frayed at the edges. When Sanguinius vanished into the warp portal, his form swallowed by the teeth of the Empyrean, the animal inside him roared. The chains that bound his wrists and anklets meat to cage him became weapons against his own flesh, for he was a beast of obligation, not escape. The sheer, desperate need to claw back the future for the angel's sake was the first time in his life that he had fought for something beyond himself. It was a revelation. The mockery of it was the uncertainty, sudden, blinding absence of vision. For the first time, he was a man, blind and stumbling, not a god foretelling the inevitable, and it was terrifying. When the ruined storm's fury began to ebb, revealing the path to the throne world like a knife through the galaxy's throat, the decision was a whisper in the void. Sanguinius stood before him, a figure of light and feathers, the warmth of the angel's presence a stark contrast to the coldness of his own future. The Emperor's judgment awaited. The lion's captivity had been elaborate, but Sanguinius offered him something else: agency, the insidious, devastating gift of choice. The Night Haunter hated it, fearing it, but the hunger for the possibility of redemption was a flame in his hollow chest. The final act played out before the fleets dispersed, like chess pieces on a board of broken stars. In the stasis coffin, he was laid not as a prisoner, but as a relic of a shattered faith. The angel's hands were gentle, the weight of his final words a testament to the brother he had never truly been. Destiny, brother, may be a shifting mirror, not a fixed road. The futures we saw might not must. The coldness claimed him, but not the emptiness. The stasis field's first breath was like the last note of the funeral dirge, and the briefest of sensations cold, the cage, the silence flooded him with a peace he'd never known. The coffin was a casket, a tomb, a womb. Jettisoned into the black, his body drifted into the embrace of nothingness, a prisoner of time, a martyr to the prophecy that had defined him. The Emperor's assassin would come, or she would not, and the liminality of that threshold was a mercy, a torment, a reprieve. Years later, the void was a vast, indifferent sea, and the coffin was a speck of bone and flesh in the endless dark, its occupant preserved in the amber of his own doubt. The stars were distant, cold witnesses, their light a silent lament. The Sheldron's crew, a crew of scavengers with hollow eyes and calloused hands, mistook the coffin for a relic of gold, a fragment of the dark age of technology. They dreamt of riches, of the future in their own bellies, and when they cracked the seal with a sigh of escaping pressure, the stasis field collapsed like a dying star. The Night Haunter's awakening was a rebirth. Awareness returned to him like a blade to a sheath, sharp and precise. The first breath was a knife, the first heartbeat a cry of war. Death was a song, the crew's fear a melody, and he danced through their bodies, the wet slap of their lives ending a testament to the inevitability he had once known. Only Elvar was spared, not because he was weak, but because he was useful. The terror of the journey was a pilgrimage, a slow descent into the heart of what Curze had become. In the cramped confines of the Sheldron, Elvar became both prisoner and confessor. The Night Haunter's madness was a tapestry of splintered philosophies, each thread a contradiction. The gentle philosopher mourning the lost vision of justice, the Emperor's law as a tool for the weak, the world as a blade that could not be tempered. The monster, the clawing, biting thing, recounting the artistry of his butchery, the pleasure of the screams, the rightness of the pain. The duality was a whip, the shifts between the two as sudden as the snap of a vertebrae. The journey was a lifetime, a heartbeat, a voyage into the heart of the storm. The sorrow of the Primarch was a palpable thing, a weight that crushed the air from the lungs. Elvar witnessed the fractures, the moments when the manth noble, the judge flickered to the surface, only to be drowned in the black bile of the monster. The tragedy was a miasma of questions, the answers stealing away like mist in the morning. Zagulsa greeted them like a ghost, a hollow city of stone and shadow, its spires unfinished, half-crumbled, as if even the architects had lost their faith in the future. The return was a low, mourning note, a whisper of lost hope. Night Lords, feral, broken, their armor a patchwork of grotesque trophies, drifted like jackals to their master's call. Talos the Soul Hunter was among the first to stand before the throne, his gaze a flicker of recognition's same face, the same cold, penetrating gaze, but the madness had changed. It was a furnace, not a wildfire. The Primarch gathered his scattered sons in the shadowed halls, not to command them to war, but to dissect the soul they had once followed. The heresy, the trial, the vision saw of it was laid bare, a dissection of the grand lie. What if we were always monsters? He asked, his voice a low, rasping thing, the echo of skulls clattering. The question hung like a shroud, the silence of the fortress a testament to the horror of the answer. The Night Lords, the Emperor's justice, the enforcers of Firthi were a lie, a facade, a justification for the necrosis that was their birthright. The Nostramo bloodline was a curse, a poison, and the Emperor's grand design had only made it beautiful. He prepared for his end. The prophecy of the assassin's blade was the only thing that remained, a lodestone in the dark. The final days were a sacrament, a perverse ritual. The chambers were lined with carvings, each scene a testament to every vision, every betrayal, every death. Among them, repeated again and again, the same image of a woman in midnight blue, her blade poised to strike. Emshen, the deliverance, the redemption, the final act. Elvar was the scribe, the recorder, the witness to the last moments of the philosopher. The Night Haunter's words were not a confession, but a Decisa treatise on the beauty of the void, of the inevitability of pain, of the duality. That she was coming, and in the quiet of the flickering candle, the shadows of the chamber cast long, desperate fingers across his face, hollowing the cheeks, the eyes, the soul. The agony was a palpable thing, the weight of the choices he had made, pressing down on the fragile bones of his chest. And then she came, a whisper in the fabric of reality. Emshen the Shadow, the daughter of the Imperium, slipped through the fortress like a blade through the ribs of the night. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, of anticipation, of the inevitability that had shaped him. He was prepared. The moment collided, time slowed to a crawl. The assassin's blade was poised, the final strike of the fate he had courted, reveled in, the only truth that could not be denied, a single moment of peace. A flicker of the child he had once been, before the visions had bled into his soul, before the darkness had become him. The universe was a silent scream, and in the stillness the blade found its mark. The prophecies, the lies, the truths, the choices, all of it ended in the sweet, cold embrace of the knife. The last breath, the last thought, the final, terrible, freeing truth, a choice. There is no justice in the void, only the cold, sweet silence of the end. The Night Haunter died, and Konrad Curze was reborn, for a moment, in the quiet, before the dark claimed him fully. and the legacy of the terror, the prophet of the inevitable, the broken thing, was left to rot in the shadows of the Imperium, a testament to the cost of belief in a lie that was beautiful and terrible and all-consuming. Night Haunter had sent his guards away hours before, his final command to the few sons who remained forbidding them from interfering with the fate that stalked them all. Some had protested with hot tears and clenched fists, swearing their blades would cut down any threat to their father. But Curze had silenced them with unexpected tenderness, fingers brushing the tears from their cheeks as he explained that this ending was no mere death, it was the completion of a pattern written in the stars before the first of them drew breath. He spoke of prophecy and the cruel symmetry of justice, his voice like a lullaby promising nightmares to the innocent. When Mitchen slipped through the shadows, she found the primarch of the 8th Legion seated as a king might await his coronation, his head slightly tilted as he studied her approach. The faint glow of the chamber's failing lumens danced across the hollows of his face, turning his eyes into twin pools of liquid night. There was no fear in that gaze, no flicker of defiance, only a quiet fulfillment, a starving man's final breath before the feast. Mitchen, her blade bared in a hand that remained steady despite the churning sickness in her gut, hesitated. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft sibilance of her own breath. Her instinct screamed at the wrongness of Ithais was a demigod, a being who could have shattered her with a thought, a being who had once torn the stars open with his wrath. Yet he watched her with the calm acceptance of a man about to set down his burdens. The assassin's strike was almost mechanical, her body responding where her mind faltered. The blade slid home as if it recognized its own resting place in his chest, the hilt nestled against his robes as a child might embrace its parent. Mitchen, trembling, retrieved the recording device from the edge of the obsidian table where she found it, its surface cold as the void between worlds. The last thing she saw before the shadows swallowed her whole was the faintest curve upon Curze, lips of farewell, a benediction, a damned man's final laugh at a universe that had never known hesitation. The fragment of the message that survived the purges, whispered in the dark cells of inquisitors and the fevered dreams of remembrancers, carried no plea for forgiveness, no admission of guilt. Only a voice that had been shaped by the screams of the guilty and the innocent, the voice of a judge who had condemned himself. He spoke of systems that created wolves to devour the weak, then cursed the beasts for their hunger. He spoke of inevitability, of the blade that had been forged in the Emperor's blacksmiths and now returned to its master's hand. The Night Lord's legions fractured as if they were made of glass. The first stabs of violence came not in the halls of Tagalsa, but in the quivering stillness of the aftermath, where warriors stood in mute disbelief, their armor shining with the blood of their father. The Terran veterans, the last of the chains that had once bound them to the Imperium's ideals, now turned on their Nostramo brothers, their arguments a razor's edge that cut through the fragile bonds of loyalty. Some sought to hunt the assassin, their hatred a wildfire that could not be quenched by the final words of a dead primarch. Others gathered in the shadows, their voices low and fevered, preaching that the murder was a gift, a coronation, the final proof that their father had been the truest of them all. Companies devolved into packs of starving beasts, ships torn apart by their own crews as they vied for the scraps of Curze's legacy. The halls of the Tagalsa, once a place of whispered secrets and cold laughter, echoed with the screams of the dying. The air was thick with the smell of burning flesh and the ozone tang of plasma weapons. Battles were fought not for strategic objectives, but for the vindication of philosophy, the last shred of identity that had not been shattered by the fall of their father. Some of the warbands that fled into the void still clung to the ghost of purpose, their terror as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Others descended into carnivals of slaughter, their screams echoing through the void as they harvested the agony of the helpless. The Eye of Terror became a sanctuary for the hunted, a mirror of shattered reflections where the striplings of a dying empire could be kings in their own right. Chaos was not worshipped, but it was a shadow that walked beside them, a whisper in the dark, an acknowledgement of the rot that had always been in their bones. The millennia that followed were a slow bleed of the VII Legion's soul. Raids were launched with the precision of clockwork, entire worlds plunged into the dark before the first scream had even been heard. Some saw the broken cities as scripture, a testament to the truth of their father's vision. Others saw them as pleasure gardens, their screams a symphony of ecstasy. They never fought for territory, for glory. They fought for the echo of a man who had been dead for 10,000 years, a voice that whispered in their bones long after the light had faded from their eyes. The last of the night faded, the candles' flames sputtering as the last whispers of the ancient text were consumed. In the dim light of his small cell, the archivist Malcio felt the weight of the past pressing down upon him like a suffocating fog. The candles had burned to nothing but stains on the makeshift altar, the scent of burnt wax and something else, something metallic and sharp, like fear, clinging to the air. The book had been his companion, his confessor, his tormentor. The truths it had given him were black stones that had sunk into his soul, dragging him down with their weight. Outside, the ash-gray world of Chorus 4 had forgotten the dawn. the only twilight a pale smear of light that could never pierce the toxic clouds. The excavations were a series of grotesque shadows moving in the ruins below, their work a blasphemy against the tomb of the Night Lords. Every step, every shovel of dirt was a desecration of the dead. Malcio, his fingers tracing the grooves in the ancient tome's surface, felt the chill of the air in his marrow. The book was a fragment of the past, a fragment that was far too perfect, too complete. It was too neat, a confession left for the Imperium to find. The thought slipped into his mind like a blade, its edge cold and sharp. He rose, his joints cracking like old bones, his breath fogging the glass of the window. Below, the lights of the Mechanicus teams flickered in the dark, like fireflies in a graveyard. The ruins of the fortress were a testament to the arrogance of the Imperium, a corpse that had been picked clean and yet refused to be still. The archivists, the tech priests, the scavengers thought they were uncovering the truth, but they were only the playthings of a dead god's amusement. Malcio turned to the Voxlink, his fingers trembling as he activated the encryption circuits. The report he would send would be a lie, a truth that had been twisted into something more palatable. He would be forced to cut out the heart of the story, the parts that spoke of the Emperor's own complicity, of the way Curze had been a mirror to the Imperium's own soul. The Inquisition, he knew, would not want the truth, not the whole of it. They would want the comfort of ignorance, the warmth of the lie. The chronometer chimed softly, its tone a reminder of the world beyond the walls. The morning prayer would begin soon, and Malcio would join the others in the cold, his voice rising to a god who had created a monster to be his executioner. The irony was bitter as ashes, a jest that tasted of blood on the tongue. Stasis, he thought, would seal the book, but not the truth. The truth was a living thing, a creature that had claws and teeth and a hunger that would never be satisfied. The archivist sealed the tome, his fingers tracing the sign of the Aquila, a prayer to protect the living from the dead. He knew the truth would be sealed away, but he also knew that the truth would not die. It would live in the shadows, in the whispers of the damned, in the hearts of those who had seen the dark. In his mind, he could see them, the children of the 8th Legion, their armor gleaming like the night sky, their movements as silent as the grave. They were the ghosts of the Imperium's past, the hunters who had been condemned to the shadows. They would endure just as the book had foretold, just as the dead primarch had known. And as the archivist, Malcio, stepped out of his cell, he knew that he was the thread, the bridge between the past and the present, the man who knew the truth. The truth that the Night Lords lived on, not just in the memories of the dead, but in the very fabric of the Imperium itself. The truth of the darkness that had been created, and the terror